Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Mary Price. I'm the Events and Marketing Director at the Shingo Institute at Utah State University. Today, we are learning from Arnaud Hermans and Norbert Majerus about how behavior change, not belief change, drives lean transformation. There was a short article published on our website last month. It's titled Acting Yourself to Lean Thinking. You can read that article by visiting shingo.org/articles. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, well, let me start then. Hey, thanks to the Shingo Institute for inviting Anu and myself here today for this webinar. My name is Norbert Majerus. I'm a Shingo Institute fellow of the Shingo Institute, and I wrote a couple of books about lean. Have practiced lean for more than 20 years, mostly at Goodyear and after my retirement as a consultant. And I'm very happy today to have a friend of mine here, Arnaud Hermans.
Yes, hello, everybody. So glad that you've come to see this webinar in such big numbers. Thank you for the Shingo Institution for inviting us. Don't laugh at me. I'm a neuroscientist by training. I live in the Netherlands, in Europe, near Amsterdam. If you don't know where it is, Holland is Amsterdam. That the place is not far bigger than that. I'm a neuroscientist. I worked in pharmaceutical for years, and there I discovered lean thinking, continuous improvement, and saw that as my sort of philosophy for leadership. And I started to consult like 13 years ago. And during my consultancy, I tried to combine what I know about how the brain works with the behavior that is needed in continuous improvement and lean thinking. And during one of my presentations for the Lean Product and Process Development Exchange in Philadelphia years ago, Norbert and I met, and yeah, we were very much aligned in our thoughts, and we kept in contact ever since then. And now it alluded to this duo presentation as a webinar for the Shingo Institution. I'm very delighted to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. And the subject today is I got hung up on a slogan, and the slogan says, "You cannot think your way to lean acting, but you can act your way to lean thinking." And I heard that the first time from actually John Shook. He was at Goodyear. Actually, he came to Goodyear for a few days to help us with our lean transformation there. And I had to ask him what this means, because I had too many of these lean slogans that I didn't understand. And John explained it to me like, well, you can talk to people about the lean benefits, all the benefits that this thing can have, and so on and so on. But that does not make them believers in that the system will work. It certainly does not make enough believers that support an initiative. For me, that was very important because I led this initiative. And John explained that, but if you get the people change their behaviors, they will eventually become believers. Okay, well, that was totally counter. There was no logic to this, totally counterintuitive for me at all. Because here I am, trying to lecture our leaders on the advantages, the benefits, and everything that lean could have for our organization, to make them believers and to get them to support the initiative. And now I just learned that this may not be right. And that I just eventually forgot about this and moved on. But then I ran into Arnaud, as he said, at a conference in Philadelphia, and that completely changed my thinking. It changed my approach, and I will talk to you later about how this new thinking really made me change things at Goodyear, how I gained support of our leadership. So, Arnaud, why don't you go to the psychological piece now, and then we get to my exam.
Yeah, I will share the story that I told you in Philadelphia. It's part of a sort of construct about different functionalities, psychological functionalities, these that go on in our brains, and there are like 4 of them, and one of them is really applicable to this example, this thinking, that you cannot think your way into lean acting, but you can act your way into lean thinking, and it has to do with what we call cognitive dissonance. In a way, cognitive dissonance reduction. And cognitive dissonance is a sort of how you say that, attention that people feel that if they do something, they behave, they act, they buy a product, they like what they do to be in line with their thinking, with their beliefs. So if I buy an Apple computer, which is way too expensive, and it doesn't work seamlessly with all the Microsoft computers, my belief must be in line with my act of buying this way too expensive computer. So I have all kind of arguments brought up that sort of justifies my behavior. So in a way, we are built that our thinking, what should happen, should be in line with what we do. And the thing is that if that is not the case, and your behavior is not in line with your thinking, it's very easy to adjust your thinking a little bit to reduce that tension. And that's what's called cognitive dissonance reduction. So even people that smoke, they know it's not good for you, but they find excuses to justify their behavior. And by doing so, they reduce their cognitive dissonance. The funny thing is that in a lot of psychology, people say that if you change your beliefs, the behavior will follow. That is a sort of a well-known idea, but there is this difficulty that if you have the belief of changing your behavior into continuous improvement, you have to be able to actually do it, and that's not easy. And oftentimes it's asked to do it on top of everything else, and people struggle in doing that, and they give up and say, well, this is not going to work. This is not for us. It's maybe good for Toyota, but we are a pharmaceutical company. It will never work here. By the way, we've done it already like for years in this way. So why should we change? We were successful back then. So why shouldn't we be successful right now? By all these argumentation, people are easily led to believe that they can stick with the behavior that they're already having and they don't need to change. If for one reason or the other, people do change their behavior, it could be because of, if you're having a lung cancer episode, people often stop smoking after that incident because they now know that they really have to change. And then they can easily change their beliefs in that smoking really is not good for you and you should not do that. If people are actively doing continuous improvement and they make an improvement that benefits the company, but also themselves, and they do that, they make that action, even though they are not fully believing it, but the results and the fact of acting that way is going to change their beliefs. And they start to embrace lean thinking, and they start to even try to convince others to become lean as well, which is also a part of cognitive dissonance reduction. Because if I'm doing something and I can convince Norbert to do the same, and he does it, I feel that I'm really true. This is indeed what we should do. And my cognitive dissonance is reduced by doing that. So in that way, by changing the behavior, and you do that by creating an environment where that behavior is easy to do. For example, if you want continuous improvement, make sure there is time for that allocated. Don't ask people to do it on top of something. Arrange it. Arrange a room for that. Arrange time. Arrange that you are supporting them, that you're coaching them so that the behavior can change. Once it starts to change, the beliefs will follow. And that is the reason why the saying of John Shook, that you can easily you cannot easily change your behavior by changing the way you're thinking, but you can change the way you're acting, and that will result in a change in your belief. And so that's a little bit of the psychology and the theory behind this phrase.
Let me challenge you with an example, Anu. A few years ago, I was on a trip. It was actually a challenging trip. It was, I wouldn't go there now. It was a bus trip through Israel and the West Bank and so on. And of course, there was no smoking on the bus. There was no smoking in the hotel and so on and so on. And this person who was with us after a week or a week and a half, she said, I don't know what happened to me. I'm a big smoker. At home, I smoke one cigarette after the other, and I haven't smoked a single cigarette on this trip. And I thought, so I couldn't understand it, but okay, it's forbidden, but she had plenty of other opportunities. But now listening to Anu, maybe it was that environment that actually helped her. And unfortunately, I'm sure when she got back home to her normal environment where everybody around her smoked, she may start it again. But would that be an example of what you just talked about?
Yeah, definitely. Because and I have the same example with my parents. When they were on vacation, they quit smoking, and they didn't smoke for 3 weeks. They came back. They always went to the neighbors, which were heavy smokers, and talk about the vacation. And after one evening, they got back in smoking again. So if you change the environment, you can actually drive different behavior. And when that happens, the beliefs will change as well. They will follow.
Oh,
and that same thing happened with that lady in.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me get to a more complicated case. I had a colleague at Goodyear, and he was he looked like a football linebacker, and he probably played that position in one time in his life. Really big, really tall, and he knew everything. And he would also not hesitate to tell people what he knew. And then when we started to introduce people to Lean at the Goodyear Innovation Centers, we had Lean 101, the boot camp class, and I invited the leaders to come and teach 15, 20 minutes of the class. And I invited everybody, about half of them showed up, but this gentleman did show up. And I could see how when he was teaching these principles, they really, as the Shingo model, by the way, suggests, they really inspired his behaviors. And I actually saw this gentleman behave differently in meetings and so on. And then at the end of his career, he was close to retirement. I was sitting in his office, and he said, he was in a plant. He talked to me about a meeting that he had in a plant where he used to be the plant manager. And he said, can you believe it? They were solving exactly the same problem that I solved 20 years ago when I was plant manager there. And I said, well, were you able to tell them about your solution? He said, well, no, that doesn't work, he said. If I had done that, the same thing would have happened. They think it's my idea. It goes nowhere. In order to make this sustainable, he said, I said nothing. And at the end of the meeting, they came up with almost the same solution that I would have told them. And now we have a sustainable solution. They will implement it and it will work. And I was just amazed about the change in behavior there. Instead of just standing up and telling them what to do, this gentleman actually listened it out, and guess what? He was convinced, he believed that he had a better solution now. This was a better way to solve the problem.
Yeah. So that's it's nice to hear that, and that is also a part. If you are teaching lean thinking, that prompts you to actually start believing it. You cannot teach something if you don't believe it. You won't convince anyone. So if I'm the teacher, I really need to understand the material that I'm teaching, because I'm getting questions. I get people also pushing back. So teaching really motivates you and forces you to really understand what you're talking about, and also to really start aligning with the content of what you're teaching, and that helps you to actually start doing it, and then your beliefs will follow. And the same thing is that in his teaching, he recognized that if I push, people can push back, and if I push harder, they can push back harder. But if I give way, so if I push and I just give way, it's very difficult to develop force. So that's his approach, Bini's approach into making people really buy into lean thinking and allowing them to experiment, which is critical to the plan, do, check, act approach. And then they get ownership and they feel it's their solution and not something that the guy came and brought to them.
Yeah, very good. But now I have a more difficult example. When we implemented the Lean in the Innovation Center, we created an operation management room, a visual planning room, where we scheduled thousands of new products with sticky notes on a wall. And at the beginning, when we started, very few people showed up. And I finally got one leader to show up, and then, of course, other people came to peek in, and they just stayed outside the room, peeked over the partition and so on. And there were even fights done across the partition. Everybody blamed everybody for any problem that was visibly displayed in this room. And this was just a terrible idea. They thought we just make these things visible and then we all fight about them. And we were a little we did a little coaching and so on, but I slowly started to see more people show up, more people at least look at the information on the wall and just socially trying to behave a little better, not just get on each other's case immediately and asking each other some questions. And to make a long story short, about 6 months, 8 months, 10 months into this, I saw people look at a problem together and try to solve it together. Help, actually, it wasn't quite helping yet, but it was the blaming had started, and they started to constructively find solutions and so on. And even in another few months, and I noticed they were actually helping each other to solve this problem. It was all of a sudden, well, none of us created this intentionally, so let's just think about how can we help each other to solve it. And then one of our directors stood up and he said something that really hit me. He said, look, when I came here the first time a few months ago, I never believed that this had any chance to work. In a company like ours, there's no way that we could even think about putting problems on a wall in the open, and we all try to solve them together, he said. And when I look around this room, he said, a few months later, we're still all the same people. And he said, I have no idea what happened here. And I didn't answer because I didn't read it. Obviously, we had created an environment where they could, was it for whatever reason, was it social or whatever reason, he had to change their behavior. And at the end of the day, okay, what happened. It worked, and we had a great. We created a great system, and I bet you it's still out there. And they still do the same thing. So, your comments.
Yeah. So in creating an environment to drive different behavior, what you did are two things. One, you had the room. But on the other hand, you also briefly said we did some coaching, but just by being there as a leader in continuous improvement of the whole deployment, probably you had some more support, some more coaches with you, maybe some managers, and allowing people to spend time there. You're in a situation where you're together and you're coached, so there's a lot of attention for it, and it's really the message. The organization sends that this is really what we want, and we think this is important.
Okay, good.
And you're still going there instead of doing all your work, checking your email. You got plenty of work to do. So it better be a beneficial meeting. And after some time, people start to add value to being together. First, you have, of course, the fighting, the argumentation. But after a while, a few of them will make a change and think, yeah, since we're here together, I'm now talking to managers or people working in that other department. And now we can actually share our processes together and how we're depending on each other. And maybe I can ask them to do something a little bit different so I can benefit from that. And I might do the same for them. And then you see that the connections start to build and that continuous improvement and more productive conversations start to happen. But it's the creation of the environment together with the social environment. It's not just the physical room, but more so the social environment where you actually allow people to spend time on this and not say, okay, you did not finish your project. And then people say, yeah, but because I had to go to this Norbert meeting, and that takes hours. If your manager says, and that's rightly so, because that is really important for us to do so, then people really get the same message physically and socially. And that is really the creation of that environment where people can, what my motto is, where people can flourish.
Yeah, well, actually, Arno, this one meeting, this 1/2 hour meeting saved them 5 other waste time meetings that they would have had to
there you go.
attack the problem. So for me, this became very clear, Arno. I created these primers. I called them primers. Other environments, not only this one, like the Gemba walks, for example. Great environment for people to practice ideal behaviors. And over time, we had a very successful transformation. And I credit this learning from you for figuring out how I get leadership engaged in this in the initiative. And that happened really, really well. And if today somebody asks me, well, get leadership engaged is a common problem, by the way, in lean transformations. And if somebody asks me, this is the advice that I give them: try this. And it's hard for people to accept it because it's counterintuitive. So that's why I'm glad we got the chance here to discuss it and to lay it out there. And we open for questions, of course. And any questions that we don't answer here, please type them into the chat, and I'd be more than happy, and I'm sure Anu agrees on that too, to just send you an email and give you the answer to the question.
All right.
Again, thanks, Anu, for helping me out.
Yeah, thank you, Norbert, for reaching out for me and inviting me for this this webinar. It was real fun. Yeah, super. Enjoyed it so much.
There we go.
Blake Lamb.
I have trouble getting managers to send their people to lean events. What is the right approach here?
Descope events? No. For me, what always works is to go smaller. If an event is too much for the manager, try smaller things in-house. Do a little Kaizen thingy for half an hour or an hour on a little thing to experiment with. And the best was to actually allow that manager to see what the results are, how people collaborate together around a simple small problem, come up with an idea, try it, and that's the mini Kaizen event, small. And that is, I would say that's how to go, because if you want to send people to an event, well, the manager might think, yeah, they're away for a day, so that's my productivity is going down, and he's only looking at the costs. But if you actually do it in-house small, that could be a way to go.
Yeah, I have a very quick answer to that. I saw another question come up. I invited some leaders. I had actually, when I got somebody who that I could count on to support the initiative, I would invite that leader to the event and contribute a little bit to it. Then all of a sudden the word got around. Well, so and so is going there. and that got more and more and more people to come just to see what's going on there.
Oh, one more question, and then we'll say goodbye. But any book recommendations or any other educational resources?
Well, you
all the books from
posted the
Norbert.
article. Well, no, I don't talk too much. Well, I do. I talk about this. Actually, my latest book, Winning Innovation, has, which is a story. It has several stories about this and how what people in leaders and practitioners try to do. This is the reason I wanted the subject here. There is not a very popular book just on this subject. It is something that I found not a lot of people know about, and there is the article is published on the Shingo website, and I nothing else comes to my mind that talks about this just in the context of lean.
No, well, there is, of course, the founding father of cognitive dissonance, the man that brought the whole idea, Leon Festinger. It's a book from 1956, long time ago, where he explains with a lot of examples what cognitive dissonance reduction is all about and how that drives behavior and how you can recognize that in your own situation. And I think this is still a highly readable and highly recommended book. It's not about lean thinking, not about lean change, but more about the principle of people aligning their beliefs with what they do and how the two interact. It's a theory of cognitive dissonance by Leon Festinger.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Norbert and Arnu. It was great to learn from you both, and for those that are attending, this will be recorded, and we'll send out a recording, and we'll also post it on our YouTube channel, which has a lot of great resources as well. So thanks to everyone, and we'll see you again next time.